We made it back to J.P. Coleman State Park in Mississippi, but before moving on, we couldn't pass up the opportunity to visit Tupelo, the birthplace and boyhood home of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. He was born in poverty in a two-room shotgun house built by his father in 1935 and lived there until he was 3 years old when his daddy was sent to serve an 8-month term in the state pen for altering a $4 check. After his release, the family moved from home to home in Tupelo as Daddy tried to find work. The only constant in the young Elvis's life was the Assembly of God Church, where he learned to love gospel music. In 1942, afraid he would hurt himself on the bicycle that he wanted, his mother bought him a $12 guitar at the local hardware store. Hearing of work in Memphis, his daddy packed up the family and their belongings in their 1939 Plymouth, and the 13-year-old Elvis left Tupelo in 1948. Growing up listening to gospel and country music, in Memphis, Elvis was exposed to the blues. A legend was born. Our next stop was Natchez. The site of Natchez had been populated by Native Americans for hundreds of years prior to European occupation. First the French, then English, the Spanish, and in 1798 it became part of the United States. A communications route became necessary to this settlement far removed from other U.S. settlements, and the Natchez Trace, a postal road, was opened from Nashville. Soon, farmers from the far western areas of the United States, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, began floating their goods down to Natchez on the Mississippi River, or to New Orleans, for shipment to the eastern ports of the United States and to Europe, making their way back home using the Natchez Trace, and the town of Natchez became a major shipping port. In the years leading up to the Civil War, with the shipments of cotton, it became the richest city with more millionaires than any town in the country. Their luxurious mansions were largely spared during the war between the states, and many survive to this day. Several were open to visitors, and many were decorated for the holiday season. Across the river from Natchez on the Louisiana side is Frogmore Plantation. Dating to the 1840s, it's a working cotton plantation museum. One of its main attractions is its system cotton gin, which took Eli Whitney's invention and improved it using steam power to automate the entire process from feeding the cotton into the gin to pressing the finished product into bales. A day trip while staying at Natchez took us to the Vicksburg National Military Park. Vicksburg sits high on the bank of a sharp bend on the Mississippi River at its junction with the Yazoo River, and was the last Confederate stronghold preventing Union control of the river. Grant's taking the city was a long, laborious process fraught with mistakes and false starts. But the eventual siege of Vicksburg and the battle culminating on the Independence Day holiday in 1863 with the city's surrender was, along with General Lee's defeat at Gettysburg in the east at the same time, the turning point of the war. The Mississippi River was in Union control, cutting the Confederacy in two and completing the Anaconda Plan. The war would drag on for almost 2 more years, but the Confederate States of America was doomed. The American Battlefield Trust has an excellent 20-minute video and several articles written about the events at Vicksburg. The remains of the USS Cairo, a Union ironclad gunboat sunk on the Yazoo River, are part of the National Park Service's military park at Vicksburg. The Cairo was one of the first ironclad gunboats on the Mississippi and had been instrumental in the occupation of Memphis. She was clearing mines in the Yazoo, then called torpedoes, in December of 1862, and was the first warship ever sunk by a remotely detonated mine. Before leaving Natchez, we went out one evening to Canton to enjoy their display of Christmas lights. We left Natchez to spend the Christmas holiday at our favorite place in Florida, Apalachicola. We camped at the state park on St. George Island. The area is off the radar for most Florida tourists, who seem to enjoy the congestion and hustle-bustle of the theme parks to the east. The main attractions here are shrimp and oysters, long walks on quiet beaches, beautiful scenery, birds, paddling, biking, sunsets, and just sitting on the dock of the bay. One evening, while walking on the beach, we spied a chimney fire. No one else had seemed to notice. Sherry stayed on the beach with Opal, while I ran up to try and find a telephone. By the time I got there, the neighbors had already called the fire department and had gone to grab a garden hose. For Christmas dinner, we made coconut shrimp, and for New Year's Eve, we had dinner at the Gibson Inn. In January, we moved on up to the Okefenokee Swamp on the Georgia border to explore in our kayaks. Among other things, we learned the difference between male and female cypress trees. There are a lot of things that draw our attention as we travel. National Park Service sites are at the top of the list. Our original goal was to see them all, not just the national parks, but the other sites managed by the Park Service as well. National monuments, battlefields, military parks, historic sites, national seashores, lake shores. We're huge fans of what the Park Service does. Almost everything of natural or historical significance can be included in the 424 sites as of today, January 2023. They keep adding more. And not just the grand and beautiful like Yellowstone. Places like Bent's Old Fort on the Santa Fe Trail, a trading post in Colorado. Homes of authors and poets. Eugene O'Neill in California. We remember the best of our history, Lewis and Clark, and the worst, the Sand Creek Massacre. Of the 424, so far we've been to 296. We'll pass the 300 mark soon. There are other attractions on our list as well. Taking tours of state capitals is always interesting and fun. Presidential homes and libraries. National forests, national wildlife refuges. There's no end. As we were about to spend some time in Georgia, we went to an area where we could check a few boxes. Plains, Georgia, home of President Jimmy Carter, and also nearby to the notorious Camp Sumter, more widely known as Andersonville Prison. In the early years of the Civil War, both sides adhered to the military tradition of prisoner exchanges. Those soldiers captured in battle were held until an exchange could be worked out. At one point, after Grant had moved east and taken command of the Union forces, he received a communication from Lee proposing such an exchange. By this point in the war, escaped slaves were serving in the Federal Army, and many had been taken prisoner by the Confederates. Grant's reply to Lee indicated that there could be no exchange unless all soldiers would be equally considered. Lee answered that he was bound by the laws of the Confederacy. Escaped slaves were nothing other than escaped slaves. Black troops would not be exchanged. Prisoner exchanges ceased, and neither side was prepared for long-term care of POWs. For the first time in the history of modern warfare, prison camps were established by both sides. Priority for food, clothing, and other essentials was given by both sides to active soldiers of their own. The North had abundant supplies and means of delivering them, but even so, in many locations, Confederate prisoners were treated less than humanely, especially at Elmira Prison in New York. The South had neither abundant supplies nor the means to deliver them. Their own soldiers had little to eat and often went shoeless, and they had little sympathy for federal troops, who they considered to be invaders. Conditions at Elmira paled compared to those at Andersonville, Georgia. Photographs taken of prisoners when the camp was liberated look like those taken at the liberation of Auschwitz and Buchenwald in World War II. Captain Henry Worse, Commandant, was tried and eventually hung in the first ever war crimes trial, still today considered controversial. For more of the story of Fort Sumter, the prison camp at Andersonville, see the website for the American Battlefield Trust. We went to Andersonville to see the National Park site for the prison, not knowing that the Park Service had included there a museum dedicated to all POWs from all American wars. It was fantastic, showing the hardships American troops endured at the hands of our enemies from the War of Independence to modern times. A poem written by Jimmy Carter telling the story of his Uncle Tom was on display. In 41, the Japanese took our troops on Guam. Alive or dead, we didn't know. One was my Uncle Tom. He was the Navy's boxing champ, my hero with the crown. And now, with him gone, his family moved down to our Georgia town. My grandma and my aunts felt Tom was not his wife's, but theirs. She could feel the coolness, but stayed on to join their prayers. What bound them all together was the hope and faith and dread. When 2 years passed, the dispatch came. My Uncle Tom was dead. His wife and kids moved back out west to start their life again, and after Tom was gone 3 years, she wed a family friend. The end of war brought startling news. Tom Gordy was alive. 4 years he had been digging coal deep in a mountainside. The women took the feeble Tom and smothered him with care. He never would tell anyone what happened over there. Tom Gordy soon regained some strength and craved a normal life, but mother and sisters told him lies about his absent wife betraying him. Tom wanted her, but couldn't figure how to bring her back or overcome her second marriage vow. He got 4 years back pay and made commander, USN. It didn't take him long to find a woman's love again. Tom closed the past except when his 3 children came to stay. When I would mention his first wife, he'd always turn away. Once, when my submarine tied up where she lived with her kin, I went to visit them, afraid they wouldn't let me in. But all the folks they knew were called when I first gave my name. All night we danced and sang, because at least Tom's nephew came.